I may be light on my feet, but this video is heavy on content. It's for adults only. Viewer discretion is advised. Well, hello there, my friend. I thought I had my mute button on there for a second. I was going to get the red light from Autumn, and that caused me a little consternation, I have to say. Hey, welcome. I am glad you are here. Hopefully, I'm not yelling in your ear. I'm really excited right now. Today's been a great day. Thanks for being here. I am so glad you're here, especially considering the content that we're going to be going through. We have Anna Sonoda back on for the third part in our series on understanding predators and how to protect our children. And tonight we're going to be talking about space. We'll get in. We're going to let her uh, tell us about it. But before we do, I just wanted to do a quick plug, everybody. Quick plug for the Baby Gavin treasure hunt that is going to be starting on Monday. I'm going to open registration on Monday. And this is a 20 clue treasure hunt to try to solve the soon to be missing persons starting on the 14th. Yeah, just go with it. Just commit to the bit. Um, the missing person case of baby Gavin. And there are prizes on the line, the whole shebang. I know that people are already started working because I've seen people finding, but you can't do that yet because you're not registered yet, so it's not going to work. Anyway, join us. I think it's going to be fun. We're going to have a really good time. Also, while I've got you over on this screen, I just want to bring to your attention, if you click on this little fishy up in the icon or up in the corner of my website, that will take you over to the fish tank where we hang out on YouTube, and I invite you to hang out there. So please do that. Okay, without further ado, let's invite our guest, Anna Sonoda, onto the program. Anna, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you for having me, Gavin. I'm so excited to be doing this for a third night. This has been a really incredible 3-week series, and I'm excited to cover some more information tonight and hopefully answer some audience questions.
Well, it's a treat, and the channel is constantly growing. We clicked over to 131,000 earlier today. My wife reminded me or pointed out to me. So there are new people in the audience all the time. If you, dear audience member, have not seen the other two, stick with us for the live stream, but go back and check those out because it's it's wonderful information for parents, for grandparents, for guardians, for people who have children in your lives and you want to protect them from the predators that are out there. So, what are we talking about tonight, Anna?
So, remember when we started, Gavin, I talked about the idea that predators run on gas, grooming, access, and space. So, tonight we're talking in depth about space because you cannot have child sexual abuse without an available space to do that. And one of the most prolific spaces that our children spend the most time are schools and online. So, tonight we're really going to be diving in to both of those subjects in immense detail. Let's start, before we get into that, about some of the hallmarks that we've already discussed. Over the course of the last 2 weeks, we discussed some of the hallmarks of predation and what to look out for. How would you recognize a predator comparatively to a normal person who's trying to be nice or trying to be kind? So on this slide, we have the idea that predators are going to seesaw between elevating the child to adult peer status or relating to kids on their level. They're going to disobey standards. They're going to be the exception to the rule. They're going to find ways to create and uphold secrets with children. And by and large, we have a policy in our house. You and I talked about this at length about secrets themselves, because secrets are always about harming someone. And it's very important that we have those honest, open conversations with our kids at age appropriate levels throughout their development so that they understand how secrets can be manipulated even by people that they love and trust.
Remind us that there you said something, and I'm not going to be able to get it right, but that you said there are secrets, there are surprises.
Yeah,
Trying to
and
get kids to understand the difference, right? What were those things?
yeah, so it's the the real meat of it that we want to have conversations with openly with our children is explaining the difference between secrecy, privacy, and surprise. Do you want me to take a second to talk about each of those?
I mean, I think that's well, we can go back and look at it if we really want to dig into that. But I
Perfect.
loved how you explained it because it just, you know, I guess compartmentalizing that in a way that a child can understand. Look, a secret is we don't keep secrets. If there's a surprise, you know, we can hold on to that one for a little while. And privacy, I think that's a perfect way to be able to explain to children the difference, right? You Most
Yes.
people would just call all three of those things secrets. They're not.
Yes. And it's so important because we know that up to 60% of children, when they do tell about child sexual abuse or other struggles or adversity they're going through, they're going to tell a friend. So it's very important that we have these conversations. You may be watching tonight thinking, this is not an issue for me, Anna. I know my children and my grandchildren are safe. But recognize that your children come in contact with several dozens of children every week, whether through school, through activities, at religious outings, other off campus things they do, even at home within the neighborhood. So it's very important we have these conversations, even if we're not talking about secrets that may be built with a family member. But when friends say, keep this a secret, that's a really good cue for a child to know, I need to tell a caring adult about this.
That's terrific. That's terrific. Okay.
So, in the very first section, we talked about one of the principles of grooming is isolation. We talked about the fact that during the four stages of that grooming process, one of the hallmarks of predation is that they're going to try to isolate a child from their peer group during the splattery stage. And then during the forbidden fruit stage, that's when they're going to isolate the child from those individuals who could probably protect them the most, their caring adults. This could be caregivers, foster parents, grandparents, caring teachers, other caring adults in their lives. But that's a really important framework as we move into this concept of space, that usually one of the bedrocks that the predators are working on is making that child, even if it is not reality, right? We sit here as adults recognizing that there's nothing our children could do that would remove our love or our care for them. But unfortunately, children are dealing with a child's brain. So they might see the predator's comments as being truthful when they say, your mommy won't love you anymore, God is going to turn his back on you, et cetera, et cetera. So those threats might actually be upheld in a child's mind. So we
Well,
need to remember that children might feel isolated during the grooming process.
and I remember having those feelings that my parents didn't understand me, right? Like that my parents couldn't possibly understand how unfair it is that they won't let me go out and play wiffle ball in the street. They just don't get it, right? And of course, as a parent myself, I have spent the last now 24 years trying to teach my children that I totally get it, that I am on your side, that you can talk to me about these things. There's nothing new under the sun. So yeah, I think that a child's brain is just um, I mean, fertile ground for that kind of manipulation. Hey, real quick, before we move on, I forgot to say, we do want your questions. And typically on my channel, I just ask you to put GF in a question for me to see it. But because of the way Anna and I are set up here, I'm probably not going to see it. So my moderators are on the lookout for your questions and they're giving them to me via Slack on the back end here. So if you have questions that you want answered, please put them in the comments, and then Autumn and Mooney, Robin, everybody's gonna take care of it. And moderators, if I can just ask you if you can give me a little context when you tell me on the back end, because we may have moved on 3 steps past it when we finally get to the questions. All right, sorry about that little break, Anna.
No, you're good. You're good. I think that gives us a good bedrock as we're moving on to the next slide to evaluate these principles. So I said earlier, and when I present or talk to groups, I talk about this as the seesaw principle. This idea that predators, and when we're looking at space tonight, that's really our deep dive is where are the spaces that predators are using to exploit children, groom children, manipulate children. And this is a really critical concept that we're going to come back to again and again tonight. This idea that predators are always tracking, right? They're always paying attention in their environment to who's around me, who might be a good target, who can I attract to spend time with me, to talk to me. This is especially true when we think about online spaces. And it is this framework, this seesaw, that children often find themselves walking in general because of their developmental stage. They so desire to be perceived as older than they are. Oh, you're so mature. You're such an adult. Gosh, I feel like I'm talking to another adult peer. I don't feel like you're, oh gosh, you're only 12 years old. You seem so much older, right? These are easy ways to
Yeah.
compliment and build up a child. So we're going to see that exploited, especially when we evaluate online spaces this evening.
Well, these kinds of things can be completely innocent. For example, like I'm sincere when I see, when we get a visit from a family I haven't seen in a while, and I do the proverbial, "Well, you're growing like a weed, young man," right? Like that kind of thing. You're so tall that that is designed to make them feel grown up. You want them to stretch and grow, and you want them to, at least I do. I want them to recognize that we see that you are growing up and you're doing a great job and you're doing well in school and everything like that. So these can be, hopefully I'm not saying anything wrong here, but I feel like what is an innocent and wonderful thing can be exploited by people who weaponize that thing.
And I would tack on to what you said. That example is I'm not trying to compliment you on being so mature that then I'm going to introduce adult situations or adult themes or adult content to you. I'm recognizing, wow, you're growing a lot. You've changed a lot in the time that I haven't seen you, but you're staying in your stance as the adult, mature family member. And what you'll see is that predation, especially in open spaces, possibly like schools or like online venues, can take a turn because that is weaponized against a child. And that curiosity about what do I need to do to be perceived as older? Do I need to take substances? Do I need to take more of my clothing off? Do I need to look a certain way on camera? These are the kind of things that predators know children are up against. You know, the currency for children nowadays used to be maybe how far you could ride on your bicycle or how you took a curb on your skateboard. Life has changed dramatically for children, and I know our audience listening can attest to that. All across this country, all across the world, children are facing challenges that are something completely foreign to us as adults. And we have to recognize that predators are winning the battle because
Mm.
they know exactly where to find kids. And too often, well meaning parents and family members don't understand some of the risks that are just inherent to these spaces in general.
Wow. Well, that's a stark and scary reminder.
It certainly is. So
Yeah.
let's think, what space do predators or can predators use to harm children? Well, anytime we have children, slightly older children or adolescent children mixed with younger children or adults, we have the potential for predation and abuse. This is not exempt from any specific religious environment, specific role. We talked a lot last week about the idea that certain roles give us certain access. And
Yeah.
tonight, we'll also be exploring the idea that certain roles and titles give us space at our fingertips. For example, if I'm a teacher, I have access to a classroom, I have access to hallways. I know the schedule and the rhythm of that class and that school. So those are things that could be used if you had a predator in a setting like that. Where can children, where can child abuse occur? Child abuse can occur anywhere. We've talked at length a little bit earlier about the idea that home is a very high risk space. So a lot of abuse happens around bathing and dressing rooms and private spaces. This is where it becomes a real alarm bell that goes off for me when we think about where children are making content, for example, that they're posting. Do you know where most adolescent girls create, the two locations they create the most content that they put online, Gavin?
My guess is their bathroom and their bedroom. That's my guess.
And what are the two most private places in your entire house, Gavin?
Yeah, your bathroom, your bedroom.
Right. So we have to have a very upfront conversation before we introduce devices, or if we already have introduced devices, we need to have an open conversation about, you can blame me. You can say, I heard this crazy woman talking about the spaces in which predators exploit children. And unfortunately, some of the connected devices that we're handing our kids can set them up for predation. So we need to just be mindful of that and aware of the fact that predation can happen anywhere. What available space do your children spend time? Well, I know that my children participate in activities, they participate in religious activities, they go to school, and they spend time at home and with neighbors and in the neighborhood. So it's really important that we acknowledge the potential for risk so that we can be even more prepared. This is not about being um, paranoid. This is not about being fearful. This is about having a plan so that we don't remove activities from our children's lives or believe that we can wrap them in saran wrap or bubble wrap.
Hmm.
No, instead, we need to think in terms of how can we ensure that our children are prepared, our spaces are prepared, and we as the adults have done our due diligence to select those venues that our children are spending time in.
Yeah, again, it's all about being proactive, not being reactive to the things around you, but being proactive and looking to make or make those spaces as safe as possible for your children while they continue to grow and stretch and experience life, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, when we think by and large about hands on child sexual abuse, the majority of that happens without any onlookers. The clients that I counseled who had charges against them and served time in prison for molesting or harming children, they typically abuse children without anybody watching. They had set up a space, set up the stage in such a way that they were by themselves in one on one, predominantly one on one venues with children, especially for things that were um, grooming that took place over the course of many months or even years. Does that make sense?
Yes. My natural question to that is, why did they end up getting caught if they were so successful in those private spaces? But then I'm reminded that
Mm,
something that you told us, what it was, it 70% of predators have up to 9 victims, right? So
you
could
got
just
it.
be that they got sloppy or got complacent or just were unlucky for them,
And
lucky
yep.
for us, right?
Yeah. And I'll tell you that a lot of individuals, because of the advent of computer solicitation and computer facilitated sexual abuse, we often find that the charge that the person receives has to do with something that's trackable. You may have heard or maybe following cases, especially nowadays, where the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children gets a
Hmm.
ping. They get an alert. They have, at least in 2023, I think they received 21.3 million reports of child exploitation online. That was for 1 year. So we are seeing that number
Wow.
increasing exponentially. But what happens is the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, cybertipline.org, receives a report of sexual abuse online. They then contact the closest police department to the IP address where that event happened. It is then up to that local police department. What are the resources of that local police department? How overwhelmed are they? How many
Yeah.
staff do they have? What is their technological understanding of these problems?
Sometimes it could be
And
what's happening in that moment right now. Y-
right.
You know,
So, yeah, go ahead.
well, I see these kinds of reports all the time. As part of my day job, I'm the criminal complaint guy, right? So I'm going through and I'm looking through all the public records of criminal complaints, and I can't tell you how many times I have read, we received an alert from the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, and sometimes the affidavit of probable cause will say we received the alert on the 20th. On the 24th, we responded to such and such. Uh, Most times, I'm happy to say in our area, it's 15 minutes later they're at the place, but oftentimes I can see where there was like, I don't know, a giant uh, fire going on, and these are just a little town, so they're all responding. All the emergency responders are at one spot. I see that kind of stuff all the time. So it really depends on what is happening in the moment that they receive that alert, whether or not whether or not something happens in that moment. I will say though, in my experience, and I know that people watching, there are going to be some that I know that are watching are going to completely disagree with me on this, but in my experience, the people who are working in police departments and sheriff's offices, state police and so forth, children are their number one priority. If they receive an alert that they know that a child abuse is occurring or has recently occurred, most of them are parents themselves and they hop on it. But anyway, that's a little inside baseball. I'm glad that you brought that up.
No, it's really important. And what we just have to recognize is that um, because of the internet, we have more information. And that, in a way, is a good thing because the hands on crimes that were happening, a lot of my clients were never charged for the crimes they committed, but they were charged with crimes having to do with child sexual abuse material that they received at work or that they created and
Mm.
then sent off to somebody else or bought and sold through a work computer or a home computer or a cell phone. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's
So,
the Al Capone getting nabbed for tax evasion, right? It's like, so yeah, that's a very good point. So what you're saying is a lot of these guys, I don't know if you're saying most of these guys, but a lot of these perpetrators, they are never caught for the thing that they did. They are caught for something else. The metaphorical tax evasion. Makes me
and
glad that those
actually,
other laws are there.
yeah, and actually, what research shows is that individuals who are charged with child sexual abuse material, so those online offenses, statistically have more hands on victims than someone who's charged with a hands on victim
Oh,
crime, which is pretty
wow.
astounding, especially when you think about some some segments of the population don't believe that child sexual abuse material charges are actually victim crimes. They believe those are victimless crimes.
Oh,
And
that's
I
horrifying.
believe that is changing. And we can all attest to the fact that when individuals have their faces cut off of an image and then AI, melding it to something else, we've seen several high profile people who have taken their active steps and taken their power in trying to get those things cleared off from the internet, etc. And most people, as we know, are not celebrities. They don't have huge standing. So it's really important that we all recognize as well that just this year, legislation was passed, the Take It Down Act, in order to make sure that people had the authority to request images to be removed from the internet. However, my goal, as I'm sure is your goal as well, Gavin, is to educate children so that they don't create material that could potentially harm them in the future, and that we have really active policing and preventative walls so that child sexual abuse material does not get um, easily distributed through the internet.
We've got a couple of good questions coming up. That this is a great conversation, but good
Yeah.
questions happening out there. Let's see. Do we
So,
want to stay on this slide?
yeah, I was just going to highlight a couple of things. I'm a big one for checklist. I love to be in a position of action instead of in a position of constant defense. So, what are some of the things we can do around our spaces to make them less secluded? We can stay in open public spaces. We talked a few weeks ago about the idea that you can take something that could be a one on one situation in a room with a closed door, or you could find another venue. I loved how you
Hmm.
had a comment from one of your YouTube listeners who said they were transport specialists and they would go out of their way to make sure that there was as much visibility as possible, that they were physically removed from the child whenever they were transporting them by themselves. Because again, one of the key themes that I talk about, which is often lost in this discussion, the reputation of the adult matters just as much as protecting children from harm. So, one of the things that we need to do is think about what are the spaces I work in with children or closely to children? And is that beyond reproach? Is there anything that could be perceived as suspicious about my actions? Do I take children home one on one? Are kids riding in my car by themselves? Do I do anything that could obscure the onlookers or potential other adults who could potentially be supervising, even in a casual way, walking down a hall, for example. So I'm always a proponent of keeping doors open, keeping blinds open, as much as possible, having venues in which you have the potential for other individuals and adults to be in an open hearing and looking situation.
Very good. Yeah, that has been one of the, I guess, worries that I've had as a person who would volunteer and work with youth. I was always really worried about people believing that I might do something, and so I've gone out of my way. I've almost felt paranoid doing it, making sure doors are open, making sure that there is space between me and the child, that there's another adult there, because the idea of somebody even lobbying an accusation is frightening. It's scary. So
And we
yeah.
find that more and more adults are retreating, especially men are retreating from mentorship roles and service industries that are about working with youth. And we must do a better job of creating, crafting, updating, and revisiting policies at these agencies like Boys and Girls Club, who rely on caring adults out in the community to serve a certain population that would benefit tremendously from that sort of mentorship. So we have a lot of work to do, and I know that we can do it in order to make men and women feel more comfortable to attend and serve youth.
That's great.
So let's talk about schools. I don't know about you and your kids, with the exception of homeschool, most kids go to a school. So they
Hmm.
are physically in a school space. So let's use the school setting as almost an example of how to do things right. I'm in no way saying that abuse cannot happen at school or the relationship for grooming cannot start at school. But I think it's important that we recognize a few facts about schools. Schools are required to train their staff. Most of the adults who are in a school have a role to play. They have a job. Most of the volunteers are actually people like you and me who are coming to read or coming to have lunch or something like that. But the majority of people who are in the space know that there's not really private space at a school. If you're a teacher in a classroom, for example, and if we have any teachers listening tonight, they can certainly chime in as well with what they do in their classrooms. But by and large, in a classroom, you get your desk space, but your room is almost open to the public.
Hmm.
You have other teachers who are coming in. You have maybe a parapro who's coming in and out to help a certain student. You have administrators who may be coming in and out. So schools are established in a way that says we are mandated reporters. Everybody understands their obligation from a moral standpoint, and more so, their legal obligation. And schools have received critical legal action for not reporting because they are all required mandated reporters. As we talked about earlier, this idea that if you know about or have a suspicion of child sexual abuse, you must report that within 24 to 48 hours, or you could be on the receiving end of legal action. So I think these are some really important themes, especially because it's very hard to find a solitude in a school. I don't know the
Hmm.
last time that you went into a school, Gavin, your own children's school or another school, but it's hustling and bustling. You've got kids coming and going, and the idea that we would have one on one space is very unlikely. Maybe in a tutoring session or in a specific space. But what I notice when I go to schools is that by and large, the doors are open. If the doors are shut, they have a glass panel
Yes.
oftentimes so that you could peer in. So these are some things that I think schools have done a really good job of, and we can use that as a almost a model as we move forward when we're thinking about how can we improve spaces when we're thinking about where my child goes to sports or where my child goes to art practice or music lessons, things like that.
Theater or whatever. Yeah.
Right, right. Is there anything that stands out to you about that list, Gavin, or something I've missed that you would add?
No, I just, one of the things that I worry about, like I was thinking as you were talking about that, is of our children's school, especially as they get into high school. I think that those that would be predators would understand the places where they could hunt. I think they'd be few and far between, but locker rooms, for example, they don't have a clear view just because of the nature of what they are and what is going on in there. Um, I grew up participating in theater, and so you've got green rooms, and you've got side stages, and you've got orchestra pits, and you've got the you've got all. I'm sure that there are. I think that a school is a very, very good example of it is set up to minimize the danger, but I also kind of wonder about, well, I had a guest on. Her name is Beth. I'm blanking on Beth's name right now. She's so amazing. Um, who talked about Stephen Stearns having a full time job, and his full time job was he was a predator. And so, I mean, I guess what I'm saying here is those of us that are proactively on the lookout, we're looking for any opportunity of a predator being around. I guess we should take note of those places and just keep them top of mind. Because, for example, at my child's school, well, nobody's in that school anymore. Three of them have graduated from the high school, but there is a big auditorium, and it is always dark. Doors are always open, but it is always dark. And it has a pit, and it has a stage with curtains, and there are places on the sides of the stage where pianos are stored and chairs and and stuff like that. So as I've been listening to it, I've just been thinking about, I hope teachers are trained to kind of recognize like scuttling about and scurrying about in those places that are really suspicious as places where bad things could happen.
Yeah, if you go to the next slide, we actually get
Ah,
the
look at you.
we you sort of you set it up beautifully because I deal with this a lot when I help people in religious communities. When you think about large churches or cathedrals, you have an immense amount of space oftentimes, and
Hmm.
you're exactly right. A lot of the doors are open. So we have an opportunity here as a community, as parishioners of a religious space, as family members of a student who might go to school to bring these topics to light to the administration. Is it possible to lock the amphitheater when it's not being used? Is it possible to draw the curtains so that the lights are always on and the curtains are always drawn? Or is it even feasible to lock that space? Or are all the doors always open? And just presenting that can oftentimes illuminate a potential risk that administrators didn't even think about. We have to remember that schools are now expected to be educators, social service agencies, mandated reporters, the clothing, they're feeding them, they're doing a tremendous
Often
amount.
medical services. Yeah, though they're doing
Yes,
crazy amount.
yes. So we have to recognize that for by and large, most administrators, they're doing the best they can. But if we don't have this perspective that isolated space can be exploited by any predator, whether we're talking about somebody who's a staff member or somebody who's an older kid with a younger, more vulnerable child. We have talked on and off about the idea that a rising group of uh, people who are receiving charges for child sexual abuse are juveniles. And this is of grave concern and interest to me. I think this is something that we as a culture are going to see more and more of. And that means that schools, unfortunately, when they have congregations of differently aged children, are going to have to be aware of just the points that you brought in. Where are the isolated spaces? What's closed off? And what can we do in order to make that space safer so that if somebody has a nefarious idea or a nefarious plan, they can't sneak into that auditorium and take a younger kid with them into the pit?
That just another thing that just occurred to me as you were saying that is in our area anyway, most school districts, because we live in a rural area, the middle school and the high school are the same building and they will separate them. The second floor will be the middle school, the lower floor will be the high school. But the middle schoolers have to go through the high school to get to the second floor, or they need to get down to the gym, or they're down to the music teacher. And we're talking in our area now, middle school is sixth grade. So we've got what are we at? 12-year-olds up
11
to,
year
or
olds.
11-year-olds up to
Mhm.
18-year-olds.
That's a
That
big difference.
that's a huge difference. Yeah.
Yep. Yep. And one of the things I want to make sure that that I establish really clearly is that oftentimes grooming will begin because of a relationship that is initiated at school. It's because I signed up for band and I met the band instructor. I was assigned to this class and so I met the teacher. So the grooming might take place and start at school, but oftentimes in order for the sexual abuse to occur, we have to if I'm a predator and I'm thinking like a predator, I know that I have to get that child into an isolated space and away from other people. I need to get them into a secluded place. So that's where you see that the majority of the time, individuals who are predators on school campuses, especially, will contact a child via their own personal device. It is not likely that a child is going to be sexually abused on the school campus. It's likely in today's day and age, with the average child in the United States having their first smartphone at the age of 10, it's likely that a predator is going to meet them because of school and then use that device in order to escalate the grooming and the sexual abuse. Does that make sense?
That makes good sense.
Okay, so I want to make sure that I'm not blanketly saying that schools are safe or that all individuals who work in schools are safe, but I do think it's important that we recognize that a school building, just as you've highlighted with your example that you have a wide array of kids who are all
Hmm.
there for education and they're bustling in different directions. If we don't have a system in place so that we are making sure we're taking roll, if a child is late to class, where did they go? What is the system by which you alert? I know that was a really big deal in Maddie's case because the school in Maddie Soto's case because the school didn't have a system by which they alerted parents to absent children in the mornings. If
Yeah,
they only had a system where if by the end of the day that child was do I have that right?
I
That
think
it was
so.
the end of the day that they report, they don't report at the beginning of the day. Well, that was a policy that got changed immediately after Maddie Soto's death.
Yeah.
So I think it's important for us to remember that these institutions are also making this adjustment into the 21st century along with the rest of us. And it's very important for us, if we can, if we're those advocates in our schools, in our communities, in our religious settings, in our activities, if we can be the ones to say, hey, have you guys ever thought about, maybe locking the door to that space? Or have you ever thought about the possibility of having a check-in system, or, alerting parents when a child is late to a class? That could be something that is even facilitated nowadays with check-ins and
Hmm.
technology and algorithms and so on. So
Yeah.
I think it's very important, as we're talking about this idea of space, that I'm asking and I'm putting a lot of responsibility on administrators, program directors to evaluate, take the added time. What are the available spaces where children spend time with older children and with adults, and how can we make those spaces safer?
Well, I think, and again, the purpose of this series with you is so that we can be people that are on the lookout. We can be proactive. I I honestly think that there are a lot of people that it's just beyond their realm of comprehension that anything might happen. Right? It's like, uh, for example, take Maddie Soto's case that you just brought up. They made the change in reaction to the death of a child, and I mean, and I'm not casting shade on the administrators. Sometimes it takes something like that in order to make a big change. But I guess I'm just reinforcing what you're saying. Us as parents or as guardians or as foster parents or whomever, we should be proactively trying to make those changes before there is a tragedy. I also
Absolutely.
don't want to like ruin childhood either. That's something that I'm really worried about. Um, Ruining
What
childhood.
what about this feels like it could have the potential to ruin childhood?
Um, well,
All the locked doors and not being able to run
no.
around the theater with your pals.
Well, I have to say that as a teenager, I had a lot of time, a lot of fun, engaging in shenanigans that I shouldn't have been doing, and I think that there has to be some level of tomfoolery with children. I mean, we learn and grow by making bad choices. At least I did, right? I grow the most in dealing with the consequence of something bad that I did. I'm almost 50 years old. I'm still that way. But I was just thinking of like in some states, parents are being arrested or referred to Child Protective Services because they let their child walk to the store 3 blocks away. I don't want to be a society that does that. Right? We've got to be able to let our children be um, take risks safely. You know what I mean? And the and statistically, from what I understand, I haven't looked at them in a long time, but the stranger danger that we once feared so much just really isn't a problem. Of course, we're not talking about strangers for the most part here. We're talking about known individuals, members of our families and our communities and so forth. I just don't want to. I want our kids to be able to experience risk safely.
I agree with you. I actually believe wholeheartedly that when administrators and caring adults think about crafting spaces for safety, that you actually enable kids to have more freedom and more independence. So, for example, I worked with an architect who was very interested. She was in the process of building a school for a local district, and she and I partnered because she wanted to make sure that she was building for a space where predation was less likely to occur.
Hmm.
So we talked about things like
That's
having
cool.
glass walls to a class instead of having just that one little panel of glass, right?
Yeah.
We talked about having, maybe open, sort of like an open. You might have seen this when you go to like large grand halls. You have this sort of open staircase with multiple hallways on the different floors. So
Yes.
you could stand, you know, you could eavesdrop really well. It would probably be great for high school girls, but you could stand up on maybe the fourth floor and hear what's going on the staircase on the second floor, for example.
Yes.
So when we think about making spaces open for supervision, you know, I think about things like a playground. You know, I certainly don't want an all styrofoam, you know, protected playground. I want the kids to go and get roughhoused and a little scruffed up and fall and things like that. But when we craft a space, when we craft a playground where we've thought about this is an open venue to let children be children with other age peers, that's the important piece. When it gets really strange and weird, and when I think most parents start to put a lockdown on things, is when we've got adults and kids together. There's a lot of great concern about that, and there should be, but the space could actually protect children's ability to take risks and to play and to be creative, and also protect adults from suspicion or from feeling as if the space is maybe creating venues for a potential predator. Because remember, predators are not wearing signs and they may be everywhere, but they're not everyone. So, what can we do? How can we think and craft space in such a way that children don't even feel the supervision or they don't feel the sort of eyewitness because they're too busy being kids. And it's
Yeah.
on us as the people who are crafting the space. It's on us. We're the ones deciding where kids are going to be educated, where kids are going to spend time to have those conversations. And if so, maybe change some things so that we feel more confident in the space's ability to manage the situation and the adults in that situation to uphold the policies that we would anticipate.
Yeah. Okay. I like that. You've convinced me. I'm in.
All right. All right.
I love
So,
it.
how can you use your space to keep everything above board, right? What I want is I want adults to to beat the expectations. I want them to exceed what is the protocol in that space. So if a venue asks for, you know, the window to be unobstructed, then maybe do one better and have the door open. If there's a way to welcome parents in, welcome supervision, if I'm running a clinic or if I'm tutoring somebody, welcome a space that's in the earshot of the family that I'm tutoring or the child that I'm tutoring's family, for example. Instead of picking a bedroom, maybe choose to tutor at a dining room table. Instead of driving in a car with a child by myself, I may opt to take a group of kids, or I may choose to split the work with another adult, or better yet, invite another adult to ride in the car with me. Because again, we're doing two things here. We're protecting the reputation of adults and we're protecting kids and setting a standard. You know, we've talked a little bit about the idea that this concept has the potential to grow with our children. We're scaffolding up so that when they're in their 20s, you have children who are
Hmm.
growing and grown young adults. And these are not issues that suddenly disappear when we're talking about our first job, when we're talking about our first apartment, or
Yeah.
moving away and out of state. They're going to be faced with situations in which they enter a venue or they enter a space or they enter a job and they think, oh gosh, this is kind of creepy or weird that, you know,
You
whatever
know,
those little
actually,
factors might be.
and now that you say it, it's not necessarily that the spaces that they might enter in. Well, for example, we've got a daughter that moved to New York City, so she lives in the city, and the city was designed like 400 years ago. So it's not necessary. I guess what I'm getting at is the space. A child growing up might get into a space and feel this is creepy, or it might just be that that is a dangerous place where crime can occur, something other than the kind of crime that we're talking about, right? Like, oh my
Yeah,
goodness, walk down a street in the Heights and it feels like anybody could jump out at you at any minute, right? It's not designed well.
sure. And I want our kids, yours and mine alike, and everybody who's listening, I want them to trust that they can believe their gut. When their gut tells them something's off, this doesn't feel right, this space or this person over here. I want them to trust that. I don't want them to believe that, oh, well, I can never trust my body to give me the signs and the cues that something is a little off or a little weird. It doesn't mean we need to be unkind or cruel or hurtful. It just means that we might shake things up. We may not be alone in a car with a coworker who makes us uncomfortable. It may be that we're not spending time after work with a boss who's asking us to be alone in their office after hours when everybody's gone. These are the kind of conversations that seem irrelevant now to people who are maybe listening who have 5, 6, 7-year-old kids. But let me tell you, this is the scaffolding. This is the purpose of this work is to make sure that once our kids are in their young adulthood, they know, oh, well, I can trust my gut and I have the authority to say, I'm not willing to do that.
Yeah, and if you have a 7-year-old now, you're going to blink and you'll have a 27-year-old. So it's,
Touche, touche.
yeah,
So, the other enormous space that our children find themselves on, almost equal time that our children spend in school, children on average in the United States are spending 7.5 hours on screens. So, you know, and I know that there are examples of children who are spending upwards of 9 hours into the wee hours of the morning on their devices and on screens. So, when we consider this idea of gas, we also need to recognize that a newly invented space has been the online space. So, let's talk about that a little bit. Let's explore that. And I'm sure I've missed a few risk factors. So, Gavin or the audience, if you think of one um, that I have left out here, please speak up so that we can talk about it.
yeah, you got it.
Something I won't talk about all of these, but I will highlight the fact that when we think about the internet, it is not a benign presence. It is algorithmically engineered. So
That
what do
is
I mean by
correct.
that?
Yep.
I mean, and you can speak more to this. I am not a computer scientist in the least or have that knowledge, but unfortunately, the internet and social media have an algorithmic base. So they are in charge of what material, what advertisements, what prompts, what videos, what comes next. And you and I all know that we're coming into a time where things are auto-generated. So just before you've gotten to the end of the first video, you get a suggestion about the next thing to watch. And we
Yeah.
know that children, especially young ladies, young girls are being fed algorithmic material about harming themselves, eating disorders, really pathological behaviors that are being normalized based on algorithmic logic. And I don't know about you, Gavin, but we work very hard, my husband and I, in our household to influence our children in the ways that we think are appropriate.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, a lot of well-intended parents are missing the boat when it comes to understanding that the algorithm is strong and it is leading where your child goes. It's putting out those breadcrumbs rather than what you may think, which is, oh, my child gets on and are the they are the captain of their
They're in
ship.
the
But that
driver's
is
seat.
not
Yeah.
true.
Yeah. You're right. And that's scary.
That is
Uh,
very scary.
the private chat and DMs, that might be the scariest part of the internet for me.
Well, how so?
Well, it is basically an online private space. And you brought in there, so uh, we have grown-up kids, and they introduced us to this idea of, screen protectors where you can't see anything on the side, right? So not only are the kids with their earbuds in, but you can't see what they're looking at on the device that they're holding. And sometimes they're smart and they outsmart the parents. They will go and they will buy that thing without you even knowing. So yeah, that is just a very isolating thing, and I think that can be the most dangerous thing. And I'm sorry to like just keep on rambling on here, but going back to the Maddie Soto case, a case that was tangential in that the predator was her music teacher. He was caught interacting with children on Roblox, I think, convincing them to do things that they had no idea were bad things, and I think even in that case, the computer, it was like a laptop and it was in a public place, but he convinced the kiddo to take the laptop into like his bedroom or something like that. So yeah, yeah, I think predators are very skilled. I think they're very skilled.
I think they're very opportunistic, and I think they're willing to use whatever they have at their disposal. That's what I saw again and again with the clients I counseled. But I do think that the internet is giving them a cheat sheet to finding targets.
Mm,
So, what do I mean by that? I mean, if I'm a potential predator and I want to find little girls between the ages of 4 and 8, I'm probably going to find a Hello Kitty game that has an embedded chat or that has a direct messaging option because I know by and large the children who will be using that on their devices, their iPads at home, the average family's first device is not just 10, right? 10 is when kids get their first smartphone, but children are having access to a parent's phone, a grandparent's phone, an iPad in the house, the home computer, whatever it might be.
mhm.
So we have to recognize that although the internet also gives our kids a cheat sheet, oh, I want to find a war simulation game. Okay, well, if I'm a predator sitting at home scrolling to try to find my next target, and I like 11 to 14-year-old boys, I'm probably going to find a game that is aligned with that population. So that's what I mean here when we talk about a cheat sheet for predators. And because a lot of parents, um, you know, we're all in this soup together. And it's so challenging for us to have this conversation because we are fighting against a Goliath, right? We are the symbolic David here. And
Hmm.
big tech has a lobbying industry. I don't know if you watched the congressional hearings that happened probably 2 years ago with all of the representatives from the various social media companies.
I
And
do remember that.
the power behind big tech, it shows every time I have this conversation or I talk at lectures about this. It's not as if 45-year-old moms created the internet, right? This would be a very different world we were living in if
No,
we had if we had creators who were not 20 something year old men who were building the platforms and the algorithms and these sorts of things. And
yeah.
that's not a jab against men, it's simply a jab against when we look at a product, we have to look at who crafted this product, who made this product, right? So we
Well,
cannot
and I
divorce
I
ourselves from
remember in
that
the early
now.
days of the internet, like I was working for a company called NEC Computers, which is no longer with us. But in the very early days of the internet, the ideas that we were pushing forward and that we were developing, uh, and we were just, I mean, I was a very small part of a small company in a big internet, right? But it was the very early days, and we were developing things that were firsts. E-commerce was something that I had a hand in developing for my company. And like I had no idea that that would be the seeds that would end up like landing, like major criminal organizations use the technology that I developed in the late 90s and early 2000s, or at least an iteration later on, right? To do major crime. And none of us ever thought in those terms. We were just thinking, oh, wouldn't it be cool if, and then somebody come up with an idea, and then a team of us were like, I think that we can do that. Let's do that. Or what is that company over there doing? Let's take it one more step. None of us ever thought in those terms. But there was a shift with social media where they started thinking, what is it that we want to engineer here? And and that's even scarier. Did you ever see
And what they
the Social Experiment? It was a documentary
Yes,
on
yes,
Netflix.
yes, yes. Yeah, there have been so many good ones. And then social studies is another good one if people are looking for one that's a little more recent, that's interviewing kids who had their cell phones taken away and the experiment they did of the experience.
Wow.
Um, I believe that might also be on Netflix. Um, so, what are some of the things when we're thinking about this concept that we can do, right? We need to remember that our children are partnering with us. It is our goal to partner with them and vice versa. Oftentimes, it's our decision to introduce devices into the home or into the family life. So, we need to have an upfront, open conversation about that. And we need to recognize that if our own children haven't experienced predation, they probably know somebody who has. These conversations, when I talk to young people, they are already familiar with it. It's just that their parents haven't talked about it because their parents are probably oftentimes more uh, concerned or worried or don't want to upset the children. Little do they realize most kids are already facing these issues or have friends who are facing these issues. So tonight might be a great time or over the course of the next couple of days to start that conversation with your young person. Hey, do you know anybody who's ever been solicited online? What would that look like? What would that sound like? How would that happen? Where do you think you would meet somebody who might want to harm you online? What are some of the spaces that you spend time on? Because as you've already pointed out, one of the tenets of predation is isolating that child. Well, everybody's device with screen protector, the small screen, the headphones or earbuds in, children are getting more and more siloed into their own space. And in that space, even though they may be sitting upstairs in our homes or sitting below us in a basement, they're open to the public, they're open to the world, and it's on us to have that conversation or make a different decision for our family.
Right.
So, signs of
Ooh.
a problem.
Yeah.
Um, we are going to be looking out for things, remember what grooming looks like: flattery, favoritism, forbidden fruits, and fear. The example that you mentioned about the young brothers on Roblox, that individual flattered those boys. He offered them Robux, which is
Yeah.
an in game currency, which
Yeah.
is another enormous issue for well intending parents. We talked before about the idea that predators are going to give kids gifts, money, food, privileges, maybe potential status. When you think about online space, that person doesn't even have to hand the child a gift. They can send it via the platform itself or via the
Yeah.
direct message or through an encrypted money transfer system. So it becomes uh, it becomes a really dark place pretty quickly unless we know what to look for. So we're going to be looking for anybody who's trying to solicit any sort of photos from our child. This needs to be step one, if not step zero, with our
Step
kids.
zero. Yeah.
Has anybody offered to offered if you send them a picture, and these don't even have to be sexualized pictures. This could
Right.
just be a picture of your face because now, with the advent of the artificial intelligence, many of these predators are taking normal photos, even first day of school pictures, normal healthy pictures that a well meaning parent might post, and they're doctoring it up to make it child sexual abuse material. So
And
it's
by the way,
very important we have that conversation.
for anybody who doesn't understand what's happening there, just in very layman's terms here, because I don't deeply understand it myself. There are artificial intelligence models that you can take onto your computer. You can take them offline and you can run them on your computer. So, for example, if you use ChatGPT or Gemini and you've run into the the chatbot saying that's against our policies, and you think, oh, well, then this must not be possible. No, there are open source language models that people with nefarious intent can download onto their computer, and local to their computer can use that powerful AI to do all sorts of crazy, horrible things, including creating CSAM.
So, one of the things we need to educate our kids about is disabling their cameras because some of these games are, virtual reality, allowing kids to take an image of where they are and what they're doing, maybe using their bodies. So it's very, very important that we're having those open conversations. When we're thinking about the other signs of a problem, we want to be paying attention to that individual who's requesting a platform change. Most of the children who are exploited, they meet, similar to this school idea,
Oh,
right? They
really?
meet the person on Roblox or Discord, not Discord, they meet them through Minecraft, through Roblox, through another gaming platform. And then that individual takes them to a Discord, a Kick, a Snapchat, a WhatsApp, some sort of um,
They're isolating.
communication platform. Again, exactly, Gavin.
Yeah.
So again, it's that idea of like, I'm pulling you away from, you're playing here with all your friends, you're playing here with all your pals from Boy Scouts or your pals from school or your pals from the football team. But through our conversations, I'm going to take you, and you and I are going to meet either through direct messaging on your personal device because I'm going to gift you something, I'm going to give you more attention, I'm making you feel good. This is happening at a lightning speed. Recent research shows that it used to take 32 days for a child to be exploited by a potential predator online, and now it is taking 5 days. So these predators online are working very, very fast at a rapid pace to
Wow.
hook the child through what we already talked about: flattery, favoritism. Oh my gosh, you play this game so well. Gosh, I would love to meet up here with you every night so that we could play together. Oh, give me your number and I'll send you a picture of my dog. Whatever it might be, right?
Yeah.
Predators are keen surveyors of the opportunities at their fingertips. And unfortunately, the internet allows them more and more opportunity. So, what is our risk reduction checklist? And we have a few of these throughout the presentation, but by and large, what we're going to do is we're going to decide what sort of relationship we want to have with our kids and devices in the first place. It is not a foregone conclusion that a child needs a smartphone in order to be raised properly in 2025. There is a growing movement of smartphone free childhoods through whether it's school initiated or community initiated. There's a movement called Wait Till 8, which was started by a mom who wanted her daughter to wait till the 8th grade before she got her cell phone. So there are ways in which families must look themselves in the mirror. This is again back to that idea of this is about who we are, it's not about who you are.
Hmm.
Similarly, it's not about what culture is doing, it's not about what the world is doing. It's about what seems right based on our values, our principles, and what we want for you in your childhood and your development. What are some things that might stand out to you, Gavin, as you read through this list?
Well, I really like the whole join in and play along thing. Like,
Hmm.
you know what Roblox is, for example. I mean, we've got kids in that age that they're constantly playing Roblox. So I love the idea of joining in, playing along. Not only does that help you to understand, the system, the world, the digital world that they're inhabiting, but also gives you an opportunity to play with your kids, which which is
Hmm.
awesome. So
Yeah. And we have to be thinking in terms of the online use should be like a cherry on the cake. It should not be the cake. What do I mean by that? I mean, a child's life should be filled with school, sports, family, activities, engagement, hobbies, faith life if that's part of your modality, family time, family life, physical exercise, diet and nutrition, and the internet should be like a cherry on top of that cake. It's a nice treat to have, but we use it sparingly. We do not spend. That is not the main way that kids should be connecting with other kids. Now, that becomes harder as you think about communities in which kids are farther away from each other. Maybe parents can't drive the child to spend time with someone over the course of, a busy week or something like that. But what we have to remember is that online spaces are contributing to mental health decline by and large for our young people. Now, that could be because of the algorithmic messaging. It could be because kids are lonely and they're seeking online. And what they're finding there is a bit vapid. It's not as genuine as what they would experience through inhuman connection, whether through sports or mentorship or other things. So
Hmm.
I think that's a really important component of this. And just from a practical standpoint, don't allow devices in bathrooms and bedrooms. Have some clear protocols as a family about what you allow and what you don't allow. I'll tell a little funny story briefly that my husband and I discovered, because we're not tech savvy as you are, Gavin. We discovered that we could turn the internet off on
Hmm.
certain devices in our home,
Yeah.
which was like a total light bulb moment to us several years ago. But when I go and I speak, I bring this up to people, and they also recognize that that's something they can do. If we just simply said there's no internet after the hour of 9 or 10, let me tell you, those devices are going to be a lot less used. And what we do know through research is that kids are staying up later and later at night. Why are they staying up late, Gavin? Why do you think
Because,
they are?
well, because they're addicted to their screen.
And so are we. And if
Yeah,
the
the same way
internet
I
is
am.
on,
Yeah.
if the internet is on and we're scrolling, or we're waiting for a friend to get back to us, or we're looking through Instagram or Snapchat at all the things that everybody else is doing, kids are actually reducing the amount of time that they're sleeping, which is then impacting their development and their growth. So we have a call to action here as parents. And there is something we can do about it. We do not just need to lay passively that the internet is taking away our children and their childhood. So, some safety basics. Um, Remove devices overnight. If you're not willing to turn off the internet, or that you're not capable of doing that for some reason, simply have a turn in model where you
Hmm.
find a place. Maybe it's a lockbox, maybe it's something. I know that I have talked to children who say, well, I just wait for my parents to fall asleep and then I sneak into the room, I pick up my device, and then I set my alarm so I can make sure to return it before they wake up. So know your child. If
That
your
would work.
child,
That would work on me. It does not work on my wife. Well, that's what we did. Everything needed to be charging in our bedroom,
yeah,
and
yeah,
but
great.
I yeah, I think I don't think a trained ninja could get by my wife in the middle of the night. I just don't think it could happen. It definitely happened with me, for sure.
Kimberly is on it.
Oh, dude, she is. She's got all the spidey antenna out there. Yeah.
I love it. I love it. Yes, I listened to research that said that a mom can hear, a pin drop inside the house, and a man can hear a pin drop outside the house, right? So
Yeah.
our domains are sort of biologically programmed there.
That
So
is
she'll
interesting.
hear she'll hear the adolescent crawling in to pick up a phone.
Yep. But that
Some
is
other
true. And I
things.
will hear the garbage
Yeah,
truck or the
yeah,
street sweeper
yeah.
or whatever. Yeah, that's funny.
Yeah. Whenever possible, I love to encourage role play. So the idea that we're going to use a current case in the local news or a current case in national media to facilitate a conversation in our own homes with our own children. Many families have a routine of having a check-in where, maybe it's a Saturday night or a Sunday night. We go over your phone and we look at your direct messages, and I check the sort of content that you're looking through. Now, what could be the flaw of this plan, Gavin, if you have a set
Children,
time?
well, children are smarter than adults on this sort of stuff. They will be able to hide those kinds of things. However, might I suggest that I mean, there are parental controls and logs on routers that you can implement. I mean, we had a particularly
Keystrokes, even.
sneaky, yeah, we had a particularly sneaky child, and that's the kind of stuff that we had to resort to. So yeah, the problem is that children, if you are not educating yourself on technology, and I understand if you're not, because I mean, I love technology. I love aviation. So you can give me a quiz on anything modern aviation. I can tell you all about it, but it's useless, right? So I understand how. how some people may not be inclined to learn. But if you're thinking about the safety of your children, you really do need to try to keep up, because they will outpace you if you don't if you don't keep up.
And one of the trends that we're seeing is that children are finding themselves in situations, young men, young women, in situations where they are being fast tracked through the grooming process into exploitation, where somebody's threatening to financially hurt them, to physically hurt their families. Much of this exploitation originates from outside of the United States, but it's having an incredible impact on children who don't have those necessarily those fences up around them, or don't know the steps to take to contact a parent or to hand over a device and say, this person is saying they're going to do this with my image, or this person is saying they're going to kill me if I don't send them $2,000, whatever the racket might be, the
It,
potential for exploitation is there.
the important thing that we also need to recognize is that there are predators that are like Stephen Stearns is alleged to be, right? Just a lone wolf doing his thing. And then there are criminal organizations that are organized crime going out and doing the kinds of things that you just said. They so and they are mostly overseas, but it happens that the victims are definitely in our own backyard. So yeah.
Absolutely right. Um, Discuss with your child sending semi-nude and nude pictures. We have research now that it demonstrates that 1 in 4 high school sophomores in the United States has sent a picture semi-dressed to someone that they knew was only a contact online, but was not a friend or a person that they knew in real life. This is
Wow.
something that we are noticing, that the trend is that children are creating a lot more of their own child sexual abuse material. And you might be listening thinking, why is she calling it child sexual abuse material if a child has created it on their own? And that's because as soon as that picture gets taken, that act alone is a criminal act. And when that image is sent to a friend, a boyfriend, a lover, a contact on WhatsApp or whatever, that is a criminal act. Receiving it is a criminal act. If you receive it and then you send it off to your best friend, the person who hates this person and would love to
Yeah.
see them, this is incredible fodder for bullying and humiliation. So many children are failing to realize the criminal outcomes of creating content, semi nude, nude content of themselves, and then distributing that online. That's a remarkable
Wow.
issue that is happening countrywide.
Wow.
So here are some resources for you as parents. NetSmarts is geared towards slightly younger children, but these are programs that you can go through with your teen or with your adolescent. I would even recommend that before you bring a device into the lives of your children, or if you already have, you can still take a step back and say, we're going to redesign, right? We're going to recontract how we relate to this device, how you relate to the device, and what, as caregivers, as foster parents, as grandparents, what we've decided as we've learned more and we recognize things that are happening either in your behavior, in your social world, etc. So never feel as if you've made a choice and you can never ever go back. On the contrary, you have the authority to make a different choice, to
Yeah.
alter the policies. Remember what we talked about a few minutes ago. This idea that policies are not just like statues that get made once. We have to constantly revisit, oh, well, is it a smart idea to have the doors to the theater open in 2025? Maybe not. Maybe that worked in 1982, but now that we're in 2025, that's not a safe choice anymore. So, similarly, family protocols are going to evolve and change as you recognize who's the child we're working with and what are the circumstances of their choices and their life as they grow.
That's terrific.
So, what are parents to do? We have got to talk to kids about the potential for child sex abuse. We've got to talk to them about grooming and what that looks like. You can use the 4F model. It's very easy for children to understand. My 6 year old, my youngest, understands the concepts. This is not something that is beyond their cognitive ability. We also must teach kids about their ability to assert themselves. And one of the pieces I wrote about in the book talks about explaining it to kids like their pencil case. So every one of my children, before they get ready for school and the school year starts, they all have to get a pencil bag or a pencil kit or a pencil box.
Mm-hmm.
And they have inside that pencils, erasable pens, highlighters, maybe some whiteout, markers, etc., colored
Yeah.
pencils. And that's because different assignments require different tools. So, similarly in life, you sometimes need to be a lead pencil, and then there are other times where you need to be a highlighter. You get my
Yeah.
drift here, Gavin.
Absolutely.
So, in the
Yep.
same way, we need to remind kids that there are often going to be times where we want them to be polite, we want them to follow the rules, but there may also be times when we need them to raise hell, and we need to teach them what are the ways to do that in the scenarios that they might be present.
Yeah, I love the giving them the permission to say no. Like teaching them what it's like to be polite and also maybe teaching them sometimes you don't have to be polite. You have permission to be rude. You say no.
Yes, yes. And when they do, we've got to be the agents of advocacy and say, yeah, that's right. We had
Good
a
job.
recent incident that happened in our family where we're at the family function, my daughter recognizes that the conversation is going into something that petrifies her about ghosts and things like
Mm-hmm.
that. And she said, "All right, I think that's enough of that. Let's have a subject change." And I complimented her in front of everybody on, really nice pivot. And then another adult went back to the same conversation topic, and I stopped the conversation and said, the child has spoken. We have to respect that we need a different subject change. If you would like to continue this conversation, take it offline, take it into a
Yeah.
different space. But when our kids do assert themselves, or they say, no, I don't want to give that person a hug, or I don't want to kiss that person, let's reinforce that.
Give
Let's
them the
not say,
attaboys and
you have
attagirls.
to,
Yeah.
you're being a bad girl, you're being a bad boy. What an incredible opportunity for our kids to see us come to their rescue and say, yeah, right on. You did the right thing.
Yeah, exactly. Terrific.
We also have to use real words for body parts. I think the most important part of this slide is the last part. Let's imagine that a child has endured some sort of strange or weird behavior that somebody has done around them. How are they going to be able to advocate for themselves or even communicate what's happened if they don't have the proper terms? Oftentimes, families feel like playful or silly words are a way to make children comfortable, and instead, it's actually handcuffing children in many ways.
Well,
They
and I
do
think
not have
they
the
make those
ability.
choices because they themselves are uncomfortable. That yeah, just be a grown up, nut up, just do the right thing.
And facilitate a conversation with your pediatrician. Let's have a very open conversation about that the next time you go for a well check or before school starts and you have a well check, so that you can maybe get another resource or get another person involved so that you're not doing it on your own. But it's very important for parents to recognize, and anyone watching, that if, or, I was involved in a case where the child had referred to their private parts as a cookie. And
Hmm.
they did the right thing. They came to the adult in the space and they said, somebody touched my cookie. And the adult after adult after adult did the wrong thing because the child didn't have the correct words to say, somebody put their hands in my pants, and that's not the right thing to do. So
Yeah.
we have to do our due diligence in getting over ourselves. It's only 7 words, it's not a ton of words, and use the proper terms.
I love that. I honestly think that a lot of times it's about the adults being embarrassed about those words. And I don't know. I sometimes think we give words too much power over us, right? Just
Hmm.
give yourself permission to be the person that's in charge of your language. It's yeah. I run into this a lot, by the way, in religious settings where they will be reading the Old Testament and still can't say ass. It's written in the Bible and they can't say it, right? It's like it's a magic word. It's Voldemort. I cannot say that,
Funny.
right? So we just need to not let that language have so much power over us in this case, right? I mean, I know words have power. What I'm saying is we don't want to let words have like a mystical or magical power over us. We should be able to be comfortable using penis, vagina, all those things without saying things like cookie or whatever, right? That's we should be
And
grown-ups about it.
predators that I counseled said, I got to use the playful term as an indication to the child that it was something to be played with, that it was funny, that it's a game, we're sort of gamifying the human body rather than showing the respect and the reverence and the privacy that it requires.
Yeah. Wow. That's yeah. I mean, so everybody watching just be okay saying the words that embarrass you. You know what? I was we were just visiting our my in-laws. They're on a service mission like 2 hours away from us, so we get to see them. They're normally about 3,000 miles away from us. Um, my mother-in-law used to be easily embarrassed by saying whatever. If I said the word underwear, she would turn red. Right, it's just, and she actually told me this past weekend. She's like, "Nope, Gavin cured me of all that because I used to just poke at her and tease her and stuff like that." Like, just yeah, don't that is a personal jihad of mine. Don't let language have mystical powers over you. We're not. It's not Voldemort, right? We can say words.
Indeed. So, my recommendation is that parents show up whenever possible. Try to be present. Be present at the game, be present at the practice. If you can't be there, recruit somebody else. So, you take a night, and then maybe a neighbor or a friend or a babysitter for a friend takes another night. Look up. Whenever we're in spaces with minors and older kids or minors and adults, just pay attention. Put your phone down,
Yeah,
put your
don't put
book
your nose
down.
in your phone. Yeah,
That's right. That's right. Just pay attention. What did we talk about a few weeks ago? This idea that I want to move the world from mandated reporters and waiting till we're reporting something to be mandated observers. If we
yes,
paid more attention, what everything I've been talking about these last 3 weeks is a pattern of behavior. This is not one thing. This is not one liner. This is a myriad of teeny tiny little events that all get stacked up together. And if you're looking, you might be more capable of seeing something. And if you see something, you must speak up. So you must go out of your way to bring it to the attention of whomever's in charge and keep going. Keep speaking until something is done about it.
very good advice.
So parents should avoid taking pictures, especially vulnerable pictures of their minor children. So the bathtub picture, the first day of school picture with the logo of the school and the classroom and the teacher's name and the building, etc. I would I would avoid that if possible, or make an album or send it specifically to the grandparents or to the friends that you want to send that to. I would avoid using substances when minors and adults are present in the same spaces. If possible, avoid it altogether. If not possible, limit your usage because just your ability to pay attention to your surroundings, where are the children, who's going where, who's going into the bedroom. We talked last week, Gavin, about some of the protocols you had in your own home about going upstairs into the bedroom spaces.
Mhm.
This becomes more and more tricky if we are inebriated or under the influence of substances. I have a bit of a thing about adults being naked around kids. I don't think that that is, just communal and friendly and, benign. I think there are real pitfalls with communities who support and encourage um, the the undressing of adults and children in commingling spaces. So if you're going to be nude, make sure that you're not around any minors. When minors are nude, respect their privacy. This goes back to the concept of privacy, secrecy, and um,
And
privacy,
surprise. Yeah.
secrecy, and surprise. A lot of people, come at me for, we're a naked household. This is just what we do. Well, let me tell you, the predators that I worked with will exploit any vulnerability. And if it's normal in your household for the adults and the kids to be nude with each other, then boy, oh boy, are they going to use that to their advantage.
I guess I've lived in a
Um,
naive world. I've never, never even thought that that
you
happened.
you would be amazed. You would be
Wow.
amazed.
You know
And
what?
some
Maybe I
well,
shouldn't
I
pass judgment because like when our kids were little, we would go to the pool at the gym or whatever, and then we would go into the locker room and we'd get showered. Like I would take our boy in with me, shower him up. We would shower together, and then Kimberly would take the girls, go in, shower them up and everything. But it was
sure,
but we're talking about little kids. We're not talking about just hanging out naked in our house together.
sure, sure. But a lot of communities are, there's this sense of like it's beautiful and natural for children and adults to be nude in the same spaces together. And this is something that I think um, predators recognize, and they may um, join communities like that because of a loose fence when it comes to dressing, especially children dressing. So
Mm.
that is just something that is my harp on thing. I know some people disagree and they're entitled to their opinion, but that's something that I'm not budging on.
Good for you. I do like the last one here. Avoid forcing children to show affection to others. I mean, my grandmother, who died at the age of 94, 92, sorry, um, was like to her last year on earth complaining that her dad made her kiss her cousin. Yeah, right. She was uncomfortable with it 8 decades later. So yeah, like you don't need to give me a hug. You don't have to give me knuckles. It's good to see you, buddy. That is fine.
Yes, and we should role play. If you've got a real touchy uncle or a touchy family member and you know you're going to see that person, let's role play with the child. Oh, well, how are you going to handle that when the uncle tries to tap you on your bottom as you say hello or as he gives you a hug? Well, let's make sure that, you're standing next to daddy, or, you extend your hand for a fist bump, or, let's allow our children, let's bring something that we would otherwise not talk about. Your example is spot on. Why wasn't anybody saying, that's really weird that I have to kiss
Yeah,
that person?
yeah,
Um, this is, kids are getting a lot of information at their fingertips, and we need to join that open, uh, communicative space with them and influence it the way that we think it should be shaped, and not letting other people or other influences. And some of our worst offenders are moms and grandparents who believe there's an obligation to, give me a hug, give me a kiss, show that person affection. And in today's world, when a child wants to show you affection, boy, oh boy, Gavin, they're going to find a way to show you
yeah.
affection.
They'll do it.
Hopefully, we've all been on the receiving end of a kid who spots us and drops what they're doing and just barrels towards us to give us that big hug or that sense of connection or physical touch. And that's
Yeah,
a beautiful thing. But we should not be forcing affection um, on our children.
yeah. I agree.
So, as communities, all of us, no one here is an island unto themselves. So, as a community, what are some of the things we can do? We need to have these open conversations. We need to bring up some of the themes that you may have learned tonight or in other nights or in the research that you're doing on your own. How can we shape the communal spaces, the religious spaces, the activity venues where our families congregate and spend time. We need to recognize that there should be a posted way for families to report grooming or any sort of inappropriate behaviors of either an older child or an adult. These communities that say that doesn't happen here, we don't need to worry about that because that would never happen. I would argue that
Yeah.
those communities that go out of their way to say, if you see something, the administrator's phone number is this, similar to when you walk into many large airports nowadays in the bathrooms, they have posters about human trafficking and
Yes.
they have instructions about who to call. If you see these things, they have the signs listed, and then you can text this number or send it to this person. We need to do the same thing in our communities. And it may seem, oh, that's so negative to put that out there. But many of the communities I talk to after devastating sexual abuse has gone on, they say, well, we didn't know who to go to. We didn't know who to report this to. So as a community, be forthcoming. Give them that information in advance. Maybe you don't put it physically in the bathroom stalls, but maybe you have it on your website or you have it as a school that
On a
you would
bulletin
welcome
board
and
or something.
encourage that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No, I was going to say, as you're saying that, I think the ones that would uh, maybe feel like it would be taboo or in bad taste to do those kinds of things or don't know who to talk to or report to, those are the ones where it's more likely to happen. It feels like, so yeah.
absolutely. Is there anything that jumps out at you here on this list?
Um, yeah, the improved visibility in spaces where minors gather. I like that a lot. Um, yeah, I, I like, I don't know, just keep doors open, keep space. I loved your conversation about the architect designing a place where it is open. Um, and I was trying to think about like in our homes, one of the things about living in our home is we've got this awesome historic home. One of the bad things about it is because it's a Victorian home, everything's compartmentalized, right? Everything is its own little room. And so, if there are people with bad intent in our home, and I think we do a pretty darn good job of protecting our home, um, our place isn't really designed very well. It's a 125-year-old home, so everything's compartmentalized. I love the idea of creating a design that makes it so that there are no little hidey holes, little places where uh, where bad people can do bad things. I like that a lot.
Yeah. And when in doubt, just don't meet at home. Have venues, go out to restaurants, be out in the front yard, explore
Yeah.
different spaces, or minimize the amount of people who are there so that you're not having to supervise 40 people, you're only having to supervise 8, for example.
And I like the idea, like in a church, for example, right? The if you've got a big sanctuary that has a stage and it has stage left and stage right and it has scrim lines and all those things, those are places that just need to be off limits and brightly lit. You know, like think about,
Or set up cameras. I
yeah,
know many religious institutions nowadays are just putting in cameras with a recordable feed and going back over it, maybe having it be witnessed live, or maybe it's just stored for posterity in case a situation comes up. But just the presence of a camera. I don't know about you, Gavin, but I know that when I'm driving on the busy Atlanta highways or busy Atlanta roads, I notice when I see those cameras up and I'm driving through, it does do
so
something.
done. Yes.
Psychologically changes your behavior, right? So
Yeah,
many
it's like
religious
the
institutions are doing that.
it's like those signs that give you your speed, right? They make
Yes,
you change.
yes.
Well, and speaking of just the technology here, one of the things that drives me the craziest when I'm investigating on something is in 2025, I get some kind of like surveillance video or security video from a business or a home that is not HD that is poorly lit. And guys, in 2025, it is so cheap to store your videos in perpetuity. It's okay. Don't delete them. Just let them store in perpetuity. It's cheap to get cameras that can see in the dark, in full color, in full 4K, and it's cheap. So, like, if you're going to be installing cameras, like Anna was just suggesting, please don't get a 480p camera that can't see in the dark. Get it, and please don't get a system that deletes things after 14 days or whatever. Storage is cheap, cameras are cheap. Just do it.
That's a good blog concept for you in
It
the future if you're ever bored. All those details. That would be really helpful for
yes, that's a
people.
good idea. That is a
Yeah.
very good idea.
We have to remember that predators are outnumbered. They're outnumbered by us, they're outnumbered by the caring adults who we live side by side with, that we go to religious communities with, that we go to school with, that we send our children to school with. So we are not outnumbered. It may feel like we're outnumbered, but we are not outnumbered. What we have failed to do in certain situations is use our action and use the power that we do possess. So we have to look up, we have to show up, look up, and speak up. We have to create communities in which we're all talking about this subject. It can't just be one family and everybody else is left out in the woods. We have to look out for those vulnerable families and possibly go out of your way to bring information to them, volunteer yourself to observe that child or observe the practice if you notice that somebody can't be there for them. But be a villager, be part of a village that's going to help protect and support all families that are living in your communities. Um, Oftentimes, we have to use media in order to get attention to a situation of whether inaction or subverting survivor testimonies. So, when in doubt, use that. Children realize that they have a camera mostly in their hands and they have the potential to uh, alter the course of a circumstance just by pulling out their phone and taping something. So, similarly, if you have information and the agency or the group or the school is failing to act on your behalf or the behalf of your family and child, bring in the media and get attention to that case.
You know, speaking as a member of the local media, we love when people come to us with this kind of stuff. We love it. We bite onto it. We do not let go. It's so yeah. Even if you live in a rural area, there will be an old paper. There will be a digital publication. There will be a TV station. We just love this stuff. But what the media needs, like you just said, is some kind of evidence that they can cling on to. I just kind of did a rant on Facebook yesterday to a group of people in my area where I was just like, okay, you cannot just sit here and complain about this problem that you are facing that is
Mm,
real and say, I don't want my name on it. And I don't want to, I don't want you to, I don't want people to know that I'm talking about this. You have to be brave. You have to have video. You have to have audio. You have to have photography. You have to be able to say, my name is Gavin Fish and I hate this. And this is what happened. You have to have a spine, and it's extremely difficult to do. But when it happens, man, us members of the media, we jump on it, and we can make real change.
yeah, you absolutely can. And you have a bigger microphone than most people. So that's a wonderful thing to add on. But to be as accurate as you can in the facts and explore what are the sort of protections for a whistleblower who might be coming out with a story that could be potentially devastating to somebody's career or somebody's livelihood. That's something to explore as well. And oftentimes, people in the media can shed light on that for you as well.
Yeah, it's great advice.
So, one of the things that we must talk about is reporting. And I'm often in crowds of mixed age, and I remind the youngest person up to the oldest person that anybody can report grooming or child sexual abuse. allegation. You do not have to be 18 to report. You could be any age. So who do you report to? You can report to the Department of Family and Children's Services, otherwise called Child Protective Services. So it might be called DFACS in your state. It might be called CPS in your state. You can call
CYS, Family
CYS.
Youth Services, so
Mhm,
FYS. But every county has them. Every
mhm,
municipality has access to that.
mhm. And what you do when you phone that number is you give all the accurate information you can, giving as many of the details as possible. It is not your job to investigate or prosecute or judge the case. Your biggest power, your biggest choice is to call and make that report. If you feel a child is in imminent danger, you should call the civil authorities. I know that many of the religious communities here in the South have taken on a new policy about contacting civil authorities for any religious leader, religious volunteer, or religious employee who is who has allegations or who has suspicions of grooming and child sex abuse, and then going to the religious institution, but first going to civil authorities.
When you say
Again,
civil authorities,
giving
what are you saying?
police 911.
Call 911.
Yep.
And I think
Because
we said in the first one, or at least I said in the first one, get to know the people that serve you in your area. Get to know your police chief. Get to know your sheriff. Just get to know just get to know everybody. And like even in big cities, there will be a precinct that is your precinct where there is a lieutenant there or there is a captain there. Get to know that, and that person will be in the community. That's their job. They will show up at civic events. They will show up and do presentations in schools. They will go to school board meetings. Just get to know those people, and when you build that relationship of trust, I called the sheriff today, um again on my day job. It wasn't because I like was some crime fighter or anything like that, but just today I had a conversation with the sheriff because he is the president of the prison board and I have a relationship with him. I can give him a call. So it doesn't matter if you are in like just a little town with one stoplight and one police officer, or if you're in New York City, build those relationships in your community. If you don't already have those relationships, call 911. 911.
absolutely, absolutely.
There's not a
Um,
single 911 dispatcher in this country that will be upset at you for calling to report a child as being abused.
absolutely.
They will want to give you
And
a gold medal.
they'll be able to direct you in the next steps.
Hmm.
Many people I talk to are afraid of the information coming out about who made the report. But what you need to remember is that you can stay anonymous when you make these reports. And oftentimes, when I talk to people, it's not necessarily that the agencies that they have reported to have outed them. It is that they have called, their neighbor and told them that they just called, or they've called their
Yes,
best friend and said it. And then, you know how
they've
communities
outed
are.
themselves. Yes.
They outed themselves by gossiping. So if you make a report, lock your lips, keep it to yourself. You do not need to go out and, wave a flag that you've made that report. Um, for online exploitation, you have the website is cybertips.org. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children is the clearinghouse for all those reports. As we said before, over 21 million for the year of 2023. That number is only going up. They do respond, they do send it on to local police who then have the authority to decide how that is handled. If we do not report crimes at the beginning of this session, when we very first started, Gavin, I said that only 30% of all child sex abuse is even reported. So we have an enormous distance to go when it comes to reporting, and that could be the difference between your listeners and your viewers picking up the phone or getting online and making a report. Alternatively, when we're thinking about if it's an agency or a medical provider or some sort of an expert, you can always call the licensing board, you can call the medical board, you can call the supervisor, the board of the agency themselves to alert them to any grooming or suspicions of child sexual abuse.
Excellent.
My goal through these conversations we've had over the course of the last 3 weeks, and enormous thanks to you, Gavin, for making it possible, is that all predators run out of gas. So I hope you will help me in my mission to protect kids and empower families to be prepared to raise a generation of kids who know how to partner with us for their safety and well-being.
I'm glad that you have been here. Oh my goodness. Okay, we've got questions. We've got questions.
Great.
And man, what are we at now? We are we're coming up on 2 hours, Anna. I can't believe that's amazing. Okay. Uh, these are from my moderators. Um, so thank you to whomever you are that asked the question. I don't know who it was that asked it, but thank you. Autumn sent in to me, if you were SA'd as a child, actually, we are not monetized. If you were sexually assaulted as a child, are you more likely to be attracted to that type of person when dating? Do you know that?
If you were sexually abused as a child, are you more likely to be attracted to
You're
what?
the type of abuser?
Um, okay. So survivors of childhood sexual trauma have uh, usually a higher likelihood of relationship challenges. So that may not be as overt as saying you're definitely going to be attracted to that person or you're definitely not going to be attracted to that person. There's interesting research about some of the consequences or the ripple effect of that that may have to do with arousal or attraction in adulthood. What I think is important to recognize is that each and every case is unique and different. And my recommendation is if you notice a pattern of your selected partners or individuals that you tend to fall for and it's not in line with your your expectations of your future, to maybe go and see somebody and talk about that, because what can occur is that people get stuck, almost like a tire in wet mud, that you go over the same path over and over and over again, and that wheel just has no traction to get out. And therapy can often just be a wedge of wood that we can put underneath that tire and help you move. And whether or not you're in the same arousal pattern to that person, or maybe if you're even unaware of some of the threads from that childhood experience that may be showing up in adulthood, that's the power of a good clinician, a good, smart clinician. And not all therapy is good therapy, but there are many clinicians out there who could facilitate a conversation and some open dialogue about that trend if you feel it's moving in a direction that is not healthy for you and your future.
Excellent. Um, Mooney says, and again, she's grabbing a question from somebody else. Question as to what sites are used most that are not common, like Discord, YouTube, Facebook, Google, Twitter, and I'll add in gaming platforms to that one. So, are there sites that you know of that we should be aware of that are dangerous places for our kiddos to be?
Yeah, I can actually send you the running list I have. I would not be able to pull all of them, but I'll email that to you, Gavin, if you want to
Yeah,
put that on
I'll put it in the
either
fish
a
tank.
blog or for later.
Yeah,
But that is a really excellent question, and it's not the end of a conversation. Hopefully, it's an opener with our kids to say, do you notice these are some of the highest risk places and venues? I know Snapchat, because of the disappearing pictures, is a high one. I know that Discord, because it's encrypted. I know WhatsApp because, again, that encryption, direct messaging that we've already talked about. But I would love to holistically answer that and give you a list so that I'm not missing some.
Yeah, no worries. So when Anna sends that to me, I will post it in the fish tank on Facebook. Nancy Mooney also adds that many chatters are very grateful to you and your time with the community. So not a question, but thank you for being here. Um, let's see. Any student, let's see if I understand this real quick. So say a student says, my teacher sent me inappropriate emails and texts. How do I report this without being ignored, gaslit, or retaliated against via bad grades? I've
Oh,
got an
so this
idea.
is a student.
Yeah, say it's a student.
Yeah. What's your idea, Gavin?
Don't go to the administration, go to the popo. That's what I think. Don't,
Take it outside of the school.
yeah,
Yeah.
go to the police.
Um, I think you have a few options. Obviously, the wonderful thing about digital devices and digital communication is that you have a record of it. We
Hmm.
talked earlier about the idea that predators are often getting caught because they get really comfortable using online methods of abusing kids. And to have these messages, to have the direct messages, to have the emails is gold. I know that it's a horrible situation, but if a child were in that situation, I would be screenshotting all of that. I would print it all out. I would gather any other examples or facts about the situation, the dynamic between that instructor and the child or other children, other patterns that you've noticed. And I would put a dossier together. I would call the local police and tell them. I would also bring it up to any sort of maybe the school board. That could
Yeah,
be a group to go to because you're absolutely right. There could be fear, and maybe you've already experienced it, of this trying to be subverted or weakened, or this isn't really a big deal. And I think it's another wonderful example of what Gavin said a few moments ago about using the media. And if you discover that multiple children in the class or multiple children who are part of this teacher's environment are experiencing the exact same thing, there's a way to gather that information and then take a wider group of kids stories to the media. That could be incredible. But the police are going to listen to that, especially because you have documentation, which too often in child sex abuse cases is the piece that's absent.
good documentation. Yes. Oh, great advice. A word about school boards, by the way. School boards are made up of people who are elected who live in the area of the school. They are typically parents, or grandparents, or whomever in the community. Now, I've been to many a school board meeting where I've thought, I cannot believe that person feels that way. But one of the things that I've never felt is this person does not care. I've never felt that. So, school board, their job is not to protect the school. Their job is to oversee the school. So, yeah, I would definitely go to the board on these kinds of things, and if the board isn't listening to you, I mean, I guess it's a three-pronged thing. Do all of the above. Get good documentation. Go to the police. Go to the school board. Go to the media. Changes will be made very quickly, and be okay just saying I am doing this because and I'm sorry, Anna. Like you are protecting yourself by doing that sort of thing. You are protecting yourself, but you are protecting the others that would have come after you if you can just summon the courage to take those steps. Because there will be at least 8 others. It'll be more. Um, okay, Gavin and Anna, I know my 13-year-old daughter's passwords to everything. How do I watch what she is doing without invading her privacy and allowing her to have friendships with people her own age? I have
Mm.
thoughts on this, but I want to hear the professional.
um, I don't know about you, questioner, but at 13, um, there are a tremendous amount of directions that a 13-year-old mind can go. I think that having used this conversation as a baseline for what you bring up with your 13-year-old starting tomorrow or starting this weekend is a wonderful first step. I think highlighting the fact that predation does exist on gaming apps and social media, and sort of taking your 13-year-old the behind the curtain, so to speak. You know, remember the story of the Wizard of Oz, that they get to the end of the yellow brick road, and they end up coming behind the curtain and they realize that it's just a guy in a machine and a loud voice. And the internet is the same sort of thing, right? And we have the opportunity here to monitor her behavior, because we know that she's going to have temptations and different influences that are going to pull her in different directions. And you don't want her behavior to online to incriminate her, to put her in a legal situation. It's written on one of the slides earlier, but I have a very close relationship with a criminal defense attorney, and they are overwhelmed by the amount of criminal evidence that comes out of kids' cell phones. So we have to have an open dialogue with our child about some of the monitoring software we're putting on, or observation software, protects you in the event that something ever happens, or that you get sent something that is harmful to somebody else, because you may not realize that the imprint of your decisions now are permanent. We didn't have that when we were growing up.
Right.
We screwed up or messed up, outside on the ball field, or at a movie with friends. There was no permanent record of it. These children don't have the luxury of screwing up online. And I would have that open conversation with her and say, for that reason, we're going to be checking your direct messaging. We're going to be going through your messages. A lot of what I see with young girls is the bullying that's happening through their devices. And
Yeah.
maybe you can even start there. It doesn't even have to be about sexual abuse or predation. It could start out with the way that we talk to each other, the way that we communicate with our friends, and how are we a kind person showing our character. But I would trust, and also have monitoring software. I would put some high fences around that precious young girl, because we know that there are factors outside of her control. And it goes back a bit to that algorithmic logic that is not the logic of her loving mother or her loving caregiver. It's something very nefarious. And if we can partner with our children and say, these protections are there because I care about you, and we'll re-examine it. Let's try this for 3 months and see how it goes. Let's try this next thing and see how it goes. But I think all the recommendations that presented here tonight about limitations of devices in bedrooms and bathrooms, turning off the internet, removing devices over nighttime, are some real core basics that might help as you go through this.
The thing that came to my mind, Anna, and please correct me if I'm off base, I want to learn here, is that I think we often think that, I think we're often labeling something as private that is something that is secret. And
Mm,
so, but when we're saying, um, I want to respect her privacy. Yes, I want to respect the privacy of my children, but I do not want to respect the secrecy of my children. And a 13-year-old, I mean, there's a lot of navigation in today's world that a 13-year-old just can't do. And so I I guess what I'm saying is, let's go back to those definitions. That there are there's privacy, there's secrecy, and there's surprise, right? Privacy we will protect. Surprise we will protect, right? But secrecy, that's where we're not. Well, that's where I would be most concerned that something wrong would take place. What do you think?
Uh, it makes me think about my daughter's journal, actually. Uh, I know that my daughter's an avid writer and journaler. I don't know if you're a journaler, Gavin. I was a journaler when I was her age. And there are times when that journal is obviously 100% private. That's her musings to herself. What I think we are sometimes missing in today's age is that we are the best frontal lobe our children have. You know, I am the frontal lobe of my children until such time as they can take over the job. So I need to sometimes pay attention to their environment, pay attention to their influences. If I notice something is awry or askew with their behavior or their mood, maybe I'll have to use the environment that they have at their disposal, whether it's things they've written or movies they're seeing or drawings they're making. You know, the equivalent I would give is like we've had remarkable cases of violent children in schools. And when they've gone back and looked at things like journal entries, messages that they've posted on their social media pages, drawings, we've discovered that there was a problem. And I would rather walk the line and break privacy with my 13-year-old than find myself in a situation where they're using substances that they bought through Snapchat, or they're running away to meet somebody that they met on Discord because they were cute and said they were an 18-year-old boy when in fact they're a 45-year-old grown man.
Yeah.
These are risks that I don't feel we have. We don't have the luxury of what our parents might have had, because the world is at her fingertips when she's on that device. So keystroke monitoring, any monitoring software you feel comfortable with, maybe even using some of the NetSmart's resource guides to figure out what sort of protocol is best for you and your family. You know your child. Unfortunately, when we bring the world into uh, our child's view through these small devices, we have no idea who they may be coming in contact with. So we need to have multiple approaches. Just like with the last question, when we talked about this idea of having multiple prongs of communicating our concerns, we need to have a multiple prong approach to supporting our 13-year-old so that they can respect that a device is just a cherry on the cake of their life. It's not the totality of it. And if we notice that there's harm, we actually need to break privacy in order to make sure that safety is prioritized.
She was saying that I was thinking again about Madeline Soto, right? When they went back and looked at her journals, the explicit nature of the sketches that she put in there would have been huge red flags to anybody that would have seen them prior to her death. So, okay,
It's
that is
unpopular. It's unpopular. You know, we think that everything we're doing online is private. There's this perception, and you can speak more to this about the engineering part of it, the computer engineering stuff. But nothing online is private.
no,
This idea, you know, if I want privacy, I'm going to buy a locked journal and keep the key. Something that I'm posting on a free website for connection with friends or things like that, just because I set it to private has no bearing whatsoever on whether that information is actually protected and private. So I think
yeah.
it's a misnomer in many ways.
You know, this connects. This is just an illustration that kind of connects, but I was talking to somebody recently who is a competitor in my day job. And I was telling her, oh, well, we're kicking your butt here. And she goes, you can't possibly know that. I was like, yeah, I know that. Well, how could you know that? You wouldn't see our internal things. Oh, it's very simple because anytime somebody goes to your website, it's a server, and they have to go through router after router after router, and many of those routers have contracts where they sell that information to places where I can buy that information. I know exactly how many people go to your website. I know exactly how many people go to my website. We're kicking your butt, right? So this is, I mean, that's just, I'm using that as an illustration to show that there is nothing private on the internet. Just not. I mean, with very few exceptions, but even those exceptions can be exploited pretty easily. So, anyway,
But a great question, a great question, and a difficult answer, but a really important conversation. between you and your 13-year-old as you move forward with what's best for you and your family.
That's terrific. Why is it the predators is the next question. Why is it that predators seem to be learning faster than the rest of us?
I wish I knew. I mean, I'll take a stab at that answer. Um, I think that we are a very jumpy group of adults right now. We are very fearful of offending people. We're very fearful of some sort of negative consequence or retribution to us as the adults. And I think predators are recognizing that in order to get to children, scared parents are a pretty easy target. And ones who are afraid of being a whistleblower or bringing attention to something or being assertive, not always aggressive, but sometimes aggressive if need be, that those are often easier targets for them. And unfortunately, we as parents are sometimes more worried about what's this going to look like? Who's going to know about this? What if somebody records me at the baseball game saying this thing about, this inappropriate behavior? We have gotten a little too worried about our own standing rather than raising hell, which has been kind of a theme these last few weeks. But raising hell when we need to raise hell and not fully embodying our ability to say no when an adult pushes up against us. There's this sense that we should all be accepting of everything that everybody wants to do. And the fact of the matter is, predators are benefiting from that cultural
Hmm.
shift, in my opinion.
Wow. I think we need to remember the metaphor of a predator. Every time we say the word predator, I think of like a cheetah or a lioness or something like that that is crouching down in the grass, looking for the weakest target, looking at the herd, looking for the young one, the little one, the limping one, the old one, whatever it is that made it the weakest. And I think that whatever we can do to mentally, emotionally exercise to make us the strong gazelle, right? That keeps that keeps predators away from us and ours. Or that's the way it feels like to me anyway. It's
Yeah,
metaphor.
there's a wonderful video of um, elephants, and all these mama elephants make a circle, and they put all the little vulnerable baby elephants in the center of this circle. So all the predators who approach this group of elephants know that in order to get to these babies, they got to get through this circle of fearsome mamas. These are
Yeah.
not gentle, sweet elephants. These
And when they
are
get
these are
you, you're
elephants
going to die
willing to
ugly and
kill.
painful. Yeah. They're going to
That's
get you.
right. That's right.
Yeah.
And there have been tragedies recently in safari communities when people have gotten too close to babies, and unfortunately, we we have almost we've almost forgotten our biology to protect our children from the outside world. And I don't mean that in a way that is needs to be alarming necessarily, but there is an ability for every parent, every caregiver to tap into an assertive, aggressive, we will not be behaving this way, you will not be behaving this way around my child, we do not tolerate this. It seems as if we've gotten farther and farther away from that and closer to this idea of like, well, if that's what you want to do, if that's comfortable for you, then I have to accept it. And I'm just not sure that anybody's benefiting other than predators.
That's a great answer. Okay, the last one seems to be a follow up from the first one. So, Anna, say you were sexually assaulted and you buried it. I would say emotionally, right? Didn't talk about it for
Mhm.
years and years and years.
Sure.
Then would you be subconsciously attracted to that type? They really want you to pin down an answer on this one, Anna.
I mean, I think there's probably some fascinating research. We are living in a time when the uh, you know uh, orientations and sexual arousal to different individuals is very top of mind, and many communities are talking about it. But I think the only thing that matters is for that individual who was a survivor of child sexual abuse, what what is it that they need out of a relationship? And what is it that they're getting out of that relationship? It doesn't actually matter if the person is the same gender as the person who molested or abused them, or if it's a different gender than the person who assaulted them. The important part is, what is the character and quality of that relationship? Too often in these situations, when childhood traumas have been subverted, we find that individuals find really unhealthy relationships. They may have a high ACE score, as we talked about night one, with adverse childhood events, and that can impact adults well into the choices that they make for partners, for the other half of making a child with somebody. They might be unable to recognize some of the things about that individual that are harmful and that are ill in many ways. And I don't think that comes down to, we always fall into a trait of finding somebody who is the person who abused us as children. If anything, I would say that what I have anecdotally learned is that many people who were assaulted as children by a certain gender go the opposite direction and might find themselves attracted to people who are the exact opposite of their abuser or predator. So, but that is simply anecdotal. I think there is much more research that can be explored here. But I would say that for the individuals suffering from uh, any childhood trauma, that the important thing is less about what is the research say and what is normed. What do I need? And if I'm not getting what I need out of a relationship, then maybe I need to go and see somebody so that I can figure out what I can do to make different choices.
Excellent. I think we're at the end of our conversation. Man, this has been great.
Thank you,
All three of
Gavin.
them have been just amazing. I am so glad that that we got in contact with each other and we decided to do this, because that I recognize that that was a big commitment for you. That's 3 weeks in a row, and I appreciate you being on.
Well, thank you for having me, and thank you to your very very staminate audience to sit and listen to me rant. But I hope that we all feel a little bit more empowered, a little bit more educated. I would love to follow up if anybody has additional questions. You know how to reach me. But this has been a wonderful this has been a wonderful opportunity, and I've so enjoyed having a platform to just have open discussion and dialogue about such a critical subject to all of our families around the country and around the world.
Well, it's been our pleasure. Thank you very much. And hang out for just 1 second as I kind of finish out the video. Thanks, Anna. Everybody, yeah, stick in the comments how much you've enjoyed Anna. Head on over to the fish tank. Tell us what your thoughts are. We'd love to have conversations on that. She is going to send me that list of sites. I will put it in the tank so that there is a place for us all to go to grab that. Okay. Tomorrow night we are going to have Elizabeth Jones from Hillbilly Crime on. There have been some bombshells that have come out about corruption within the Kentucky State Police, lawsuits and other allegations, and we may have a window into perhaps what Mickey Steins was thinking when he thought that his life was in danger in the custody of the Kentucky State Police. So we're going to talk about that tomorrow night at 7:30 p.m. I hope you join us, and until then, I bid you adieu. Take care of yourselves. Thank you very much for watching this video. If you liked what you saw, please consider subscribing. And if you have any questions or comments, please leave them below.